Title IX is 37 words.
Talk to us.
So part of my role at ESPN and one of the Women's Sports Foundation is educating people about what Title IX is. Basically, equal rights for all on campus of any campus receiving federal funds. You can't discriminate against their sex or their gender. So, I worked on the 30th anniversary, 35th, 40th, 40th. And so this was the 50th, and we did a 4-part series on the 37 words.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
We are coming to you live from the new BEP studio for another thought-provoking episode of a Black Executive Perspective podcast. We talk about race, culture, and those uncomfortable topics that people tend to avoid. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. So before we get started in a very fantastic episode, I want to remind everyone to check out our partners at Code M Magazine. Code M Magazine, which mission is to save the Black family by first saving the Black man. Check them out at codemmagazine.com. That is codemmagazine.com. So today, we are joined by Carol Stiff, a powerhouse in women's sports media, to discuss her journey through corporate America, the challenges she faced, and the lessons learned along the way. Carol will share her unfiltered perspective on navigating a male-dominated industry, standing firm on principles while advancing women's sports, and the reality of being pushed out after decades of commitment. Let me tell you a little bit about Carol. Carol Stiff is a nationally recognized sports executive and a driving force behind the growth of women's sports. During her 31-year career at ESPN, she spearheaded programming for NCAA women's basketball, the WNBA, and multiple collegiate championships across ESPN networks. A Women Basketball Hall of Fame inductee. My girl, I love it. We want to learn more about that. She received prestigious honors, including the John Bunn Award from the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame and the Edward R. Murrow Award for her sports reporting. Since retiring from ESPN in 2021, Carol has continued her mission as president of the Women's Sports Network and founder of Stiff Sports Media Consulting, LLC, advising brands on advancing women's sports. She also served as the executive producer for ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries, Dream On, and the Emmy-winning 37 Words. Beyond her media work, Carol is deeply involved in advocacy, serving on boards of the Women's Sports Foundation and the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and the Pat Summitt Foundation Fund as well. A former college basketball coach and student athlete, she remains a leading voice in the fight for equity in sports. Carol Stiff, my sister, Welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my God. I mean, look, at the end of the day, as I was going through your bio, the only thing missing is they gave you land and title. All right. Very illustrious. Oh, my God, you've done a lot of great things. So I can't wait till we can dive in and learn more. But before we go there, tell us a little bit, where are you currently residing? And tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure. I'm presently living in Farmington, Connecticut, which was 10 miles from ESPN campus.
Okay.
I'm staying there, although the anchor of the Women's Sports Network is in LA. Decided to stay back here in cold Connecticut. I have 2 children. Both are adults now, both out of college, no more tuition payments.
Okay.
One's in bank financing and decides who gets loans and who doesn't, out in Torrey Pines, California. And my other child's a woman, a young woman who just got a special ed job teaching bilingual special ed to 3 and 4-year-olds.
Wow. So that's impressive. Plus, that takes a lot of patience as well, though, I could imagine.
She's very patient.
Did she get that from her mother at all?
No, I don't know where she got that.
Well, that's awesome. So listen, just going through your bio, you have you've been everywhere. You've been on major platforms. You're a Basketball Hall of Fame inductee. You've done many different type of interviews and obviously executive producer of 30 for 30. Why did you want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, talk about this topic?
Because it's so important, especially where we are politically right now. Diversity and inclusion is not wiped out of my mind or my mouth or my words. It makes us better, makes us stronger, and no one should be discriminated against.
Well, number one, I mean, see how we kick the show off? She goes right to it, right? So we're so excited for you to be here, and thank you. So you ready to talk about it? Because we got a lot of stuff to talk about here.
I'm ready.
All right, so let's talk about it. So, obviously, we're 31 years, or excuse me, you retired in 2021. Now we're in 2025. So, and you've done a lot of things along the way, but there's always a beginning. So let's back up a little bit and let's go back to the early days of your career. Okay. Tell us a little bit, what was your motivation to get into sports? Talk a little bit about that.
So, believe it or not, it was in my mother's DNA. She had a brother. She was the only woman out of 5, and he was a terrific basketball player and coach, and he coached at the University of Dayton. And so early on, we used to listen to the games on the radio, and Dayton Flyers, I think they beat John Wooden's team once. So it caught fire, but I remember the day my mom, I don't know how she got the money out of 6 kids. I was the youngest. She took him to Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
Not to watch the Knicks, who I adore or love still, but to watch a doubleheader women's basketball game. And it had Montclair State with a woman named Carol Blazejowski, and she hit 52 points in the Garden that day. And I felt like I was around my peeps.
Got it.
And basketball came very easy for me. Used to whip my brother in the backyard. He'll kill me for saying that. But
was this a Cheryl Miller and Reggie Miller type thing?
Yeah, maybe a little under talent. So, mostly boys in the neighborhood, and sports just came very easily to me. So I knew once I graduated and went on to college, I wanted to be a PE teacher and a coach. And that's what I did for the first 5 years of my life. And then I pivoted and went to ESPN.
Wow. So real quick before I go to the pivot. So when you went to see Montclair State, okay, at Madison Square Garden, which is not a small arena. Okay. How many people were there?
Sold out.
It was sold out?
It was sold out.
Wow. So I didn't even think it was sold out back then.
No,
right?
it was really, I forget who sponsored, I should know that, but it was really, it was Montclair State, Immaculata, Queen State was very good. And who was the last one? I can't remember. Anyhow,
it doesn't matter.
They were all the big top teams.
So you said you found your peeps. In other words, you found what your calling then basically, right? A little bit. I
was just so enthusiastic and happy and just in awe of the talent that was on the court. And Blazejowski, I did a piece on her later in life, and she didn't make the Olympic team, but that's for another day. But she reminded me that she also had a double points and rebounds. And she reminded me that we didn't have the 3-point line. So she would have had more points.
No, you said she scored 52 or something.
52. She held the record for the longest. I think Kobe Bryant broke it.
No joke.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's, talking about breaking records, you were at ESPN for 31 years. Tell us that pivot. What made you go to ESPN? And what did you think you were going to do when you first went there?
Tony, I just remembered the 4th team, Delta State.
So wait a minute. So Delta State, isn't that a HBCU?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was pretty cool.
So tell us, you went to ESPN. What was your motivation? What do you think you were going to do? Because obviously a lot of times people start here and then they end up over here. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I was coaching my final year of coaching at Brown University.
Oh, so you were forgot. You were a college basketball coach too at Brown.
At Brown.
Ivy League. What was your record?
We did really well that year. I was there 1 year and we won defensive team of the year or something.
Did you guys make March Madness?
No, we did not.
NIT?
I don't remember doing that. No, we were good, but I don't remember making the NCAA tournament. But
so did ESPN recruit you to come there?
No, it's a great story. So I was not recruited. I decided I wanted to get out of coaching. I didn't want to have to rely on 17 and 18-year-olds either making us win or lose. If you have talent, you win. If you don't, you lose. So I decided to just dial it back and find something else to do with my life. And also didn't care for recruiting. The road
That was
work.
a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Going to people's houses and trying to convince their kids.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you're dealing with their parents.
Yeah.
And, can I start? Or all that, right?
And then Ivy League, no athletic scholarship. So you have to pay the freight. You know, you might get some financial aid, but
No,
not enough.
Not a lot.
So anyhow, I decided to pivot, and I was working for a little temp agency in Connecticut here, and I got a call. Would you like to work over at this small cable company called ESPN? It's in Bristol, Connecticut. They're looking for someone to help with their 10th anniversary party.
So this was in 89 then, right?
Well, it's 88 going into 80. Yeah, it was 89 actually because it was September. Yeah.
Because they started in 79, am I
Right.
correct?
You're right. You got it. So who doesn't want to work on a party, Tony?
I mean, flat out.
Yeah.
I'd have been there. Sign me up.
So the communications department hired me with Rosa Gaddy, who was also a Brown employee. She was the first SID ever that was a woman from Brown. She was before her time.
So when you say SID, what do you mean?
Sports Information Director.
Got it.
For Brown. And so she went to this company, and so we clicked, and I loved every day of it. Every day was different. I came early. I stayed late. I did whatever they wanted me to do. They treated me with royal. I mean, it was the dream come true.
So what made you love it? Why it was so exciting back in 89, 90, 91, 92?
You felt like you were the little blue engine trying to go up the mountain. And I remember shortly after, the MLB negotiation, and ESPN got MLB. Fast forward now.
You know, it's kind of funny. I never worked. I always wanted to work at ESPN, right? My wife, my wife, she worked at ESPN, right? I worked at a few startups, but I know that feeling when you talked about, because that, ESPN, $1 billion, whatever the case may be, but even at a 10-year-old, it still was a young company that was still trying to make its way. And, when I worked at a young company, and it was like a family, we were all rowing in the same direction. Everybody was trying to build this brand. And it was like catching lightning in a bottle. Do you agree with that? Or what?
Absolutely. Like I said, the analogy of the little engine going up the mountain, you would be asked a question, you would just figure it out. Just figure it out.
Paper clips, and we would put stuff together, right? And we didn't have all the resources. We would just do it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was that way my entire career there. Then Disney bought us. We got more corporate, but adding new networks and new technology, and just every day was different. And I love that. I could never work. God bless those people that work in Detroit, and putting cars together. I just that would not be for me.
So you started off in the communications department, and then how did you pivot and started moving around and stuff to that?
So an opening in the programming department. Programming and acquisition is the department that actually cuts all the deals with the leagues, radio, every platform, and whatever we acquire, we then turn over to production to produce. So there was an opening for a very low-level program position where I was basically data entering the schedule and coding it. And
so just for layman's terms, so people, when you say data entering, explain that a little bit.
So they had these grids where the next step up was program planner, and someone was assigned to the sports center shows, someone was assigned to college football, and they would take pencils and actually enter them in on a graph of Monday through Sunday. And my job was to take what they penciled in and then put that into the computer. So 6 o'clock Sports Center, 7 o'clock Big East college basketball, and just putting them in by codes. And I did that while I was getting my master's degree, so it worked out great. And then I worked with Nielsen ratings, and that was also just filling in the number on what we got for ratings. So I learned about that.
Right.
And I asked a ton of questions along the way. And then one day, Tommy O. Jackson came up to me and he said to me, he's a legend of ESPN.
Used to be Denver Broncos, right? Was
No.
that Tom? Oh, you said Tommy O.
Tommy O.
Okay.
OJ.
Got it.
And he said to me, he was in charge of all college sports. And he was in charge of programming and acquisition. So programming, we should have this Big East game here, and these are the two teams that should play, and we should have this football team there. And he had a big old stack of files, and he goes, look, I know you played basketball. I know you coached basketball. I just don't have time to schedule women's basketball. And by contract, we have to. So here you go. And so he gave me the files, and I fell in love with that job, just deciding who I think's going to be really good, like depth charts you would do for your team, and who's going to be good from the ACC or the Big East, putting them together, finding the right window that they gave me to use, and then handing it over to production to produce.
So just so I'm clear, because that sounds like, you're playing with a puzzle.
Yes.
All right. So just so I'm clear, what you're saying is that you would get the schedules from all the games around from the conferences, and then you would pick based on the matchup and based on what you thought was a good team and stuff of that nature that the viewers would definitely dive into. And then so you would put those matches up together based on the time, the date, when the game was going to be played, whatever the case may be. And then that would turn to reality when that matchup would come on ESPN. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Got it.
But the best part was when you could put matchups together on your own, where you could go ask Gino Auriemma, it's the contract says Big East versus ACC. This is a true story. And I thought UConn was going to be really good because they had a woman named Rebecca Lobo.
Yeah.
They had this guard named Jen Merzotti.
Yeah.
They had Jamel Elliott inside. And, I said, they're going to be really good. So there's my Big East team. But the contract says an ACC school. So the year before, in 94, North Carolina won the national championship.
Okay.
So I went to Sylvia Hatchell and said, I have to put together a Big East ACC game before the conference starts. So like January. Matter of fact, how about Martin Luther King Day? Martin Luther King Day, it's a Monday afternoon. It's a big holiday in Connecticut. And so Connecticut versus North Carolina. So she said, I'll take the game. I go, it's going to be on ESPN. Robin Roberts calling the game. Mimi Griffin, all the bells and whistles. And she said, well, I'll take the game if it's at North Carolina.
Okay.
She just won a national championship.
Yeah. And so they had to leverage. They want to, I get it.
She asked the right question. So,
and you had to go to Gino now, right?
No, I had to go to the file where it said the last 2 years it was at Virginia, which is ACC soil, right?
So
ACC.
It needed to be in the Big East.
It had to be on a Big East campus. So I said, I'm sorry, Sylvia, but it's got to be at UConn, but they'll come back the following year and you can play them. No, I don't want the game. And I said, what? She goes, no, don't want the game. It's in January 16th. They're in ACC competition. I said, all right. So Pat Summit,
Tennessee.
What do you think? You want the game? Same script, Robin Roberts calling, but I laid low. I stopped talking. And she goes, well, it's during the SEC conference. We have Auburn on Saturday. And wow, to get up to Connecticut on Monday. Tony, I didn't say a word.
Classic sales move. Classic.
Kept talking. And then she said, for the good of the game, I'll take the game.
And that became a rivalry.
Big time.
Right? Because Tennessee was Primero number one.
They were one.
And then UConn was moving itself up. And then they became a superpower.
Yeah.
And then they played every year after for a while. Is that correct?
That's correct. So that day, so think about that. I made that call in May. The game went to air in January. So how many months is that? You do the math. It's half a year, right?
Right.
So the game goes to air. Tennessee's 1, UConn's 2. Both undefeated. They held the AP poll that day. The place was packed. You could feel the electricity at Gamble Pavilion. And UConn wins. They go on to be undefeated, win the national championship.
It was like 36-0 that year, right?
Yeah. And so I remember going back to congratulate both coaches, and Gino was on the dais giving his remarks, big old smile. And then I went down the hall, and there was Pat looking at the stats outside the locker room. She looks up, and I go, Pat, this was unbelievable. This was going to be massive rating, which it was. And she goes, only thing she said was for the good of the game.
Oh my God, that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's a great story, man.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that Carol Stiff, which people don't know, was the person that actually made that rivalry happen. Okay, because she had an idea, and she, instead of her using a puzzle, said, "You know what? I'm going to do this myself. Let me reach out to the coach here and the coach there." That is a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Right?
Fast forward now, I put the South Carolina UConn game together. So Dawn Staley and Gino, and that's a rivalry now too.
That is insane.
So I'm glad they're playing each other again, UConn, Tennessee. And matter of fact, that night, in retrospect, Pat said I made one mistake. I should have flown the team from Auburn up to Stores.
Straight to Connecticut.
She took them to Knoxville, and she washed the team uniforms at her home.
So, and I want to get into that, right? Because, the coach is washing the team's uniform. That means they don't have enough money, right? They're not being funded the right way, right? Before I go there, though, I want to go back to you, because let's be fair. You, moved to ESPN, and it's a male-dominated company. Let's just be fair. And even the stories you tell me, you've told thus far, where you were programming and somebody says, "Here, you do it," okay? Versus, "Hey, I think you could be great at this," or "We would love." I think because you play basketball, it makes sense because you can do the matchups, but it was just you do it. And maybe I'm making it a little tough of it, but talk a little bit how you navigated, corporate America, because that was corporate America. It is corporate America, a male-dominated company, and be able to rise the way you did, and then more importantly, be able to put your imprint on the things that happened that you just told, 30 for 30 and all the other things.
I asked if I was going to fight a battle, I always had my facts ready to go for a rating, allowed me to get better windows, or et cetera. Asked a lot of why and why not. I really didn't stomp my feet down. I didn't want to be labeled, and I didn't want to become white noise. So I'm labeling as a feminist. I didn't want that. Surrounded myself with, which went back to my coaching days and being made the youngest of six, surround myself with teams, advocated for those around me. And then I also had allies, and they were male. I aligned myself with the male allies. A lot of times you have to know your sports, around the water cooler. Hey, that NFL game, boy, that Detroit, what a team they got.
Right.
I could always talk sports. I didn't alienate myself from the men. There was one thing I used to do was I would get to know, if we were meeting outside the company, I don't know how I did it, but I would get bios of some sort on the gentlemen that were going to be in the room, and often would say, "Hey, Tony, how are the kids?" And that just, the whole facade of a wall came crashing down. And I would sit next to him and go, "Gosh, do you have this problem with your daughter? Because I have the same problem." And then, so now you have a family. And so I personalized myself. And then on Fridays, I often wrote notes. I would shut down the office, and before emails were popular, and I would handwrite notes to people. Or call back Pat Summin and ask about Tyler. Don't ask for, "I need you to play, on this one date." So I use relationship building, and that helped.
Yeah, I mean, look, number one is classic Dale Carnegie. Okay, so I hope you guys are listening here, because a lot of the things that you have to do to break down barriers is to understand who you're dealing with. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. They want, because everybody's in their own little universe. And you took I don't want to say a back seat, but you allowed them in terms of asking the questions and stuff to that nature. And then all of a sudden, those barriers came down, like, "Oh, she knows about my family. Oh, she knows about the Lions game yesterday. Oh, and and those things are very, very important. Now, the thing also is that there probably was times where people wasn't friendly.
Mm.
Okay, there were times when you
Mm.
probably felt diminished,
Mm.
even when you did those things. Talk
Mhm.
about those times.
Oh, one comes right to mind. I was in because I worked on all our NCAA championships, men's and women's. So the last one of the year was baseball, College World Series, massive, massive tournament for baseball. And the chair of the selection committee decides who gets a bid for the tournament. We were in our summer meetings. So the season was over, and he had something in his crawl against me because I put his team, and I won't name the team. I put his team at 1 o'clock on ESPN on the regional the weekend before the big games, and he was really mad at me because he was living in Mississippi, and at 1 o'clock in late May, it's really hot,
Right.
and so I got called into his best friend was my boss. So he calls me in and he says, "Now what did you F up?" And I go, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Why would you put that team at 1 o'clock? Why would you not put them?" He wanted prime time. And he was the chair of the committee. So he thought he should get an extra, look. And I did my job. His team was not going to rate in prime time. And I put him on ESPN. I said, he's on ESPN. He's on ESPN too. And also, he'll be if he wins through, he'll be the first team to get the rest for Omaha. So what did I do? He said, "I want you to change it. I want you to put him in prime." I go, "No, it's too late. I already gave it to the NCAA. It's already published, and he's just not going to get his way." So fast forward to the summer meetings, and
So hold on real quick before you go there. So what happened?
he had to play the game at the
Okay.
time I told him,
Got
and
it,
he
got
was
it.
the first team to get to Omaha, and he was the most rested team.
So it all worked out,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
it all worked out.
Right.
And the team I've had in prime, they rated very well. And my day-to-day boss is a guy, and I said, "Dave, did I do something wrong? Because I want to learn." He goes, "No, you program it the way it should have been programmed for the viewer and for ratings and for sales." I go, "Thank you." So we go to the summer meetings. I'll never forget. It was in San Diego, and I had a young guy working for me, Delroy Jones, I think was his name. Anyhow, we're in San Diego at a hotel. Who doesn't love San Diego? And I am pacing outside the room. And he said to me, "What's the matter with you?" I go, "Oh, you don't know what we're going into." So we walk in, and I was the only woman in the room except for the woman that does the tickets for the NCAA. So it felt like the Pentagon, and the production guy couldn't make it. He was on a speakerphone. So this guy came up to me, the gentleman that was treating me so poorly, and he said, "Who makes the decision on TV windows?" And I said, "Well, we give our recommendation to the NCAA, but it's their tournament, with due respect. If they don't like something, we can talk about it."
Right.
So we sit down, we start the meeting. He would not look at me. And then he asked a programming question about the following year. Could we have the selection show on this day and not that day? And he's looking at the star phone and he's talking to production. And that's a programming, that's a scheduling. So I could just feel the blood going up my neck. And I just said, "Hey, Eddie, on the star phone, that's my area of expertise. I'll take that one." And then "Hey, Larry, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it." And then I just acted very professional and kind of went above him. Anyhow, after the meeting, we're having drinks or whatever, dinner, and the one woman in the room came up and she said, "Bravo, bravo, you handled that." So we get outside the door and Delroy goes, "Oh my God, bravo." He goes, "I'm embarrassed for the male species."
I mean, so number one, thanks for sharing that. My blood is going up just hearing the story. Okay. And one of the things, and when we talked there, when I asked you why'd you want to come on BEP, and you said, "Hey, Tony, based on what's going on right now in the country, based on diversity, equity, inclusion, I want to come in and chat about these things because it's not something that I'm a race in," and whatever the case may be. When I hear these stories, and I've experienced them as well, okay, where I've been in places where I was the only black person. And especially as I rose up the ranks to the VP level, I didn't see anybody look like me. However, I worked my butt off, obviously, right? Like you work your butt off. You do everything. You overwork. You play chess, not checkers. So you're seeing moves. You're making moves two steps ahead because you're anticipating blah, blah, blah. And then obviously you're not perfect either, okay? And then there's other things. And when you make one mistake, after all the things you've done right, you make one mistake, all of a sudden, and again, I'm paraphrasing, what did you F up this time?
Right.
Right? Which, okay, and look, let's say you were wrong, because you really wasn't, right? It was his friend, which is another issue, right? But let's say you were wrong, okay? Okay, I made a mistake. So what did I F up again? So that means, in your mind, I've been effing up stuff all along. Which ain't true, but you're making it a narrative, all right, because you're trying to diminish me. And I've experienced that a little bit. Now, I got to give it to you. And, bravo to, you made the male species look horrible. I get all that, right? But you shouldn't have to do that. But talk about, you had that face on at work, but talk about how that affected you when you went home or the day after, because one of the things that's very important for all of us to be successful is to have psychological safety, right? To see that what we do, people appreciate it. They see the value. They know what we're bringing to the table. And if something does go wrong, they're not going to erase me or erase all my accomplishments. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I often found that if I do make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, that's how you learn. I would just come right out and say, hey, that's on me. My bad. Not going to happen again. Those are hard calls to have with a rights holder too. And 99.9% of the time, the other person just calms right down. She's owning it. She's willing to learn from it. And we're going to give her that opportunity. So that's how I always handle that situation. Come forth and be righteous and all that good stuff. Regarding home, try not to bring it home. But I do remember I was going down to Howard University, and my son was young. He was he wasn't really young, probably middle school. And I let the kids go on one trip a year, maybe two, one-on-one. I had 2 children. And I took him down to Howard, and I said, look, son, you go over there, the cafeteria area. Here's some cash. I'm going to meet with the athletic director. We're going to do a game down here, and I'll be back in an hour. Okay. So off he goes, off I go. So I come back an hour later, and we're crossing that beautiful campus to catch a cab or something. And I go, how you doing? How you? He goes, hey, I'm not going to lie, but I was the only white person on this campus. And I said, how'd you feel? How did you feel? And that lesson,
What did he say?
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Uncomfortable.
Exactly.
I said, well, were they hostile? Were people nice? Oh, yeah.
Everybody
Food was great.
nice.
Food was great.
I ate that before. Oh my God, it's delicious.
But he saw
the other side.
Yeah. And so for that, I'm proud that I introduced him to that. So
that is awesome. That is a great story. So listen, you've been there for a while. You're kicking butt. You're moving around. You now ESPN executive producer, 30 for 30. And then obviously the Emmy winning one, 37 words. Real quick, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Title IX is 37 words.
Talk to us.
So part of my role at ESPN and one of the Women's Sports Foundation is educating people about what Title IX is. Basically, equal rights for all on campus of any campus receiving federal funds. You can't discriminate against their sex or their gender. So, I worked on the 30th anniversary, 35th, 40th, 40th. And so this was the 50th, and we did a 4-part series on the 37 words. And from back to 1972, right up to where we are with transgender athletes. And it was very, very powerful and well received. And it's a great, great tool of education on Title IX.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, wasn't Billie Jean King a big advocate of Title IX back in '72. Is that correct?
Yeah, she played. Yeah, she
Because
played.
she played. What was it Bill?
Billy. No,
What's his dude's name? I forget the name.
Billy
Riggs.
Yeah, Bobby Riggs.
Bobby
Bobby
Riggs.
Riggs. Yeah,
Okay.
Bobby Riggs. Yeah, yeah. She had to win.
She ain't have no choice.
She had no choice.
And he was calling her out.
Oh,
Right. And think about how, and again, I hate, but it's like a Jackie Robinson thing, right? Where you're carrying the whole race to play baseball, because if he didn't make it, then it would have been years further before black or people of color could play baseball. It was no different then, right? So let me ask you this, in terms of Title IX today, what's some of the implications and some of the things that still being, people trying to erase a lot of these issues, a lot of these policies, because they see it as discrimination on the other side. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Where do you want to start? NIL. Who's getting all the NIL deals?
Correct. The males.
Yeah, that's a violation. But they really can't prosecute because the money to date is not coming from the schools. It's coming from collectives.
The boosters and stuff.
And the
right?
boosters. It's not coming from the department. Now, with the new House settlement, which will be probably go into effect in April, Division I schools can pay their athletes up to $20 million a year. Where is
that money coming from?
Where's Coppin State going to find $20 million?
Right.
So they're eliminating positions. They're eliminating, diversity and inclusion officers wherever they can cut. They're also dropping programs, athletic programs. So opportunities for kids to compete are going to go the wayside. And I just worry about the federal funding. I don't think it will go totally away because, God forbid, most of the federal funding goes to the hospitals on campus and the research that's being done. But there are some concerns, definitely on the women's side. But the problem with Title IX is it's not being enforced. There hasn't been one school that's had to go to court or had to pay a penalty fee because they don't have the funding at the government to prosecute schools. So they're just all running the Wild Wild West.
It's a Wild Wild West,
It is.
right?
It's
It's a Wild Wild West. So the policies are there. Everybody says the right thing in a soundbite, but push come to shove, it's not being enacted, and nobody's being held accountable to making sure that it's equal access, equal funding, the whole 9 yards. Is that correct?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, in terms of accountability, when did you figure out it was time for you to start moving on? When did you think your tenure at ESPN was starting to end?
Well, I got moved over at one point. I was actually offered an opportunity to go on a job rotation. Only 6 people in the company were offered. I could go anywhere I wanted to go and learn about our business from their lens. So I went to business and development, and based out of New York, but also the 9 for 9 films I was working on with my rotation. So I was on the films group and business development. So we were back then talking about streaming and what's this Netflix before they even launched.
Stuff? Is this stuff a fad or what?
Yeah, sort of looking in this crystal ball and like guessing what was going to be coming next. So I found it fascinating, loved it. Got a call about 7 months of the 9-month rotation to go over to ESPNW, which is a .com. And John Skipper asked me to do that. And, I told him with due respect, I'm not a journalist. I don't know what a good, I could tell you what I think of that article, but I don't know how to edit it.
Right.
And he said, we're bringing you over there to be the relationship builder and basically decide what content should rise to the top. So I did that for 3 years and was watching some of the program ratings on women's sports diminish.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked Burke Magnus, my boss at the time, if I could come back to programming, which I did. I was very happy, but I didn't go back into the same role. I lost all the NCAA championships minus women's basketball. And I loved working on growing softball and women's lacrosse or men's soccer. And so I kind of noticed then that my responsibilities were diminished. But I kept pushing and, having to come up with new technology for the women's tournament, and just stayed really, really focused on what I was able to control. So that's probably where I kind of saw the writing on the wall that I'm probably not going to be here long.
Got it. And then when did it eventually end?
Well, COVID came.
Okay.
And, obviously business decisions needed to be made because no one was going to the Disney parks, Broadway, cruise lines, everything was shut down. So there was a massive amount of layoffs, and all the vice presidents in my department got retired.
So they got retired.
They were retired.
Right? I'm retiring you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
basically what
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Right?
They gave me a nice package, Tony. I was able to leave and be able to provide for my kids, but I really wasn't ready to retire, and that's why I'm still really active right now.
Well, I want to talk about Women's Sports Network, but I want to ask you a question. You gave 31 years there.
Mm.
You did a lot of work. You did a lot of the dirty work. And obviously they paid you, and I get all that, right? But how did it feel? Because I remember I had hired a life coach years ago when I was leaving one company to go to the next company. And as that job started to move, I started to move on from that career, from that company. She said something to me I never forgot. And she said, Tony, when you leave, you're going to be emotional. And I didn't know what she's talking about. And she said, no, she said, people's identity today is based on where they work. And the problem is that when people lose their job or they get laid off or whatever the case may be, that identity is gone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it takes a while for you to jump back out there again because you're mourning. I'm not the VP no more. Mm-hmm. I'm not, executive vice president of whatever the case may be, because in our minds, we think that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not. It's just a title, right? But unfortunately, that's part of our identity. So talk a little bit before we get into women's sports. How did that make you feel? And what was the mourning? If there was, maybe you're like, forget it, I'm out. And you just went on another thing.
No.
But talk about that mourning process that you had to go through.
I was shocked. I was really shocked. Although they gave me a great package, I wasn't finished. I wasn't ready. Didn't see it really coming. I wish I had gotten that lifetime coach.
It
then.
still hurt though.
Yeah,
she told me that years ago, but it still hurt.
All
right.
It hurt. It hurt for quite a bit, quite a long time. And I moved on pretty quickly, but boy, even telling my friends and telling my colleagues,
all that,
they were like, you, not you. WNBA said that. I'm like, yeah, well, it happened.
So you were able to get past it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is tough, okay? But, my pastor, my church always says, when one door closes, another door opens up. So talk about post ESPN. Talk about Women's Sports Network. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I have to give a shout out to George Bodenheimer.
You give a bunch of shout outs, all you want to.
George was the president of ESPN
Mm-hmm.
on my early years there, and the classiest guy you'll ever meet. It was always we. It was never I. He always let us do our jobs, supported us. So one of the first phone calls, actually the very first phone call I received was from Robin Roberts.
For real?
For real.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She had heard somebody else was laid off, and she was upset about that name. And I waited for her to go off on the phone. And then I took a breather and I said, yeah, me too. And so,
but those calls, and tell us a little bit, because I know when you get those calls, you don't want them, but then once you chat with people, it makes you feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She said all the right words. That's for sure. But the second call was George, and I don't even know how he knew. And he reassured me. He said, you're going to have so many offers. Don't jump at, ones you're not sure about. Gave me some, but he called me quite a few times and we still talk. And, he was just a great resource for me to get over the hump, but good guy, really good guy. Women's Sports Network. Okay, so I left ESPN in July, and then launched my advisory company, Stiff Sports Media Consulting, and that was amazing because some friends reached out, before the Women's Sports Network, and one was Val Ackerman.
Okay, the WNBA commissioner.
She was the president for 10 years, and now she's the commissioner of the Big East.
Okay, got it. She
So-
wasn't the commissioner of WNBA?
They only made this last person the
Got it,
commissioner,
got
was
it, got it,
president.
got it.
So she reached out and she said, I need your counsel on Title IX programming for our conference. Would you, take a stipend? I said, absolutely. And then another company, Fishbait, had hired 2 other guys that were let go that day, hired me as well to advise them on women's sports. And so that helped me, get my head off the pillow and pay some bills. I still had a child in college. And then that November, I got a cold call from a gentleman that wanted to launch a women's sports network, 24/7 streaming network, no paywall, no subscription. And what sold me was doing a show called Game On, which is our version that you and I would know as Sports Center.
Oh, okay, cool.
Highlights. And so the first segment was highlights. Second one was, discussion about a hot
Round table or
topic.
something
Yeah.
like that.
And then the third segment is still interview segment.
Mm.
And so I love the format. And we did about 150 episodes the first year we launched. Got some proof points out of LA produced. And I would love to see that show go for 7 days a week, just like SportsCenter. We earned it. We deserve it. I often heard people saying, well, there are not enough highlights for a full year of women's sports. When you get to college football playoffs, it's NBA and NFL. And I'm like, no,
there's a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah, there's Australian
Yeah, there's a
basketball. I
million
mean,
things going
cut
on.
me a break. So I said, no, I think I can fill it with highlights. But so we're a 24/7 network, 3 years in, all women's sports. We have live rights. We have studio. I consider us a surround sound of what ESPN and NBC and Fox are doing in live rights. We can't compete with those rights fees.
They're
But
getting billions of dollars.
Exactly. And it's growing. But we can be the storytellers, and we can tell all the stories and let an NWSL game or a hockey league or a college women's basketball. Let's learn about who the players are. So that's what we're going to focus on.
So tell us a little bit, like, what is some, because obviously there's challenges along the way. What's been some of the challenges in terms of getting this off the ground and getting more people to know about it and to be a viewer on it?
So we're really easy to find. Our distribution is fabulous. We're in 150 to 2 million homes. We're on connected TVs, Samsung. We're on Roku. Once you get used to the pattern of how to find us, we're easy to find. We're on your phone with Tubi and Freebie and Fubo on all those new chiclets of channels. So finding us is not the problem. What we have, to really focus on is getting advertisers, and that's in all women's sports. It's still not here, Tony. Still not here.
So just stop right there for a second, just so I'm clear. So you're having a hard time getting advertisers, a Gatorade or whatever the case may be, a Foot Locker or Dick's or Nike to run across women's sports content?
We're having a hard time with that.
What's the reason why?
So, first of all, people were caught off guard with the Caitlin Clark movement, not moment.
When you say movement, when it was godlike a
Yeah,
little bit, where
like
everybody was
yeah.
on it, right? So they wanted to put money towards that?
So it was too late because she came along, if you think about it, in March and April.
Last year.
And then the WNBA season. Most all the advertising's budgets are already spent.
Mm-hmm.
So we really think that 2025, we're only in February, soon to be March, that a lot of people were caught off guard and didn't have a women's sports strategy.
Ah, got it.
So they're getting calls from some of the people you just mentioned. Hey, where's our women's sports strategy? And the media we don't have one, you know. So they're building one now, but they still haven't come. And so we need advertisers to step up and support these great athletes and their stories. So that's important. And then we need we're looking for some investors come in so we can go out and get, richer rights and more expensive rights and get that Game On studio up and running every day like I want.
I love that.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. what's the end game here? What are you trying to, where do you see this going? If you get the funding and all that stuff, where do you see this going?
I kind of don't want to have a women's sports network.
Tell us.
Yeah, like it should be equal,
Yeah.
like not lesser than. You know, you still see it. I won't name names of cable networks that, you know, they're still putting all the women's sports in inferior windows.
Oh, and second tier stuff.
Yeah, and so if you give them an opportunity, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And we have many proof points. I don't know if we're still gun shy in putting women's sports in prime time, but you know, maybe on a Thursday night you'll see it. You know, the WNBA is running on a Friday night in the summer. I don't know who. I mean, they did really well, but who watches TV on a Friday night in Minnesota? I mean, you're out in the park.
To be honest, you
Yeah.
can be in Detroit, and you know it doesn't matter, right?
So that still needs to be flushed out. But I think what will happen is, and I hope this, and I saw a proof point with, and I'll call out Google. They came to the table. They were going to spend money on NBA and WNBA. And the woman who was representing Google was an Olympian rower. And she got their deck, and she's being very, you know, cordial at the meeting. And of course, the meeting starts, you know, about the NBA, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and they want her to spend $1 billion. And she shut the deck, and she goes, "I want to see the WNBA proposal." Oh, well, that was page 39 of a 40-page deck.
Right.
So she said, "It's the 25th anniversary of the WNBA, and there aren't even 25 games scheduled. I want 25 games." Push the deck back. So she wasn't going to spend a dime on NBA.
But there you go, though, right? So
That's what we need.
You get advocates like that who got money,
Yep.
that believe in it.
Yep.
So that's why it's important. I get it. You don't want to have a only women's own. I get that. But at the end of the day, you got something that eventually you get people behind it, right? And then they got money and they're pushing it. And let's give a lot of credit to you, because it wouldn't happen. Those things wouldn't happen if it wasn't for people like yourself, or, you know, Billie Jean King, or all these other, you know, forerunners of women's sports. To be fair, they even got it to where it is today. But the thing about it, which I love, you're not done. There's still more to do. There's still more there's still more hoops to jump, right? Because that's really the key here. The more that people like yourself that are out there advocating, pushing, don't giving up because you believe it, that's going to affect change.
Yep.
Okay. And, you know, that's why we were excited to have you here, because at the end of the day, what people need to understand is that you yourself, only you, have the ability to affect change. You may not think so. You may think you're going up against a behemoth, but guess what? If you just start rolling that little snowball down the hill, you get a Carol Stiff who's creating a women's sports network, which I'm so excited. And listen, you know, anything that we can do to help you. But final thoughts. Give us the final thoughts that you want to leave the audience.
Don't be
you and I could be talking all day long,
yeah,
right?
we'll have to go to the local bar, get a cold one. Don't be afraid to ask why not, and be prepared to, you know, to fight the battles that are most important to you, and that you have facts for. And then, you know, lastly, take the pride in knowing that you can look yourself in the mirror at night and say you've done good, and you weren't unethical, and you can, you know, rest a lovely night of sleep knowing that you can smile at yourself in the mirror.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. My final question. How can a Black Executive Perspective podcast help you?
Just get the word out. It's important. And keep doing what you're doing, Tony, because this is really, really important. And, you know, straight talk only helps.
Well, thank you. And just so I'm clear, when you say get the word out, what word should we be getting out?
That there's a women's sports network.
There we go. Say it loud.
There's a women's sports
right,
network.
Say it proud,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's a no-brainer, okay? We're definitely going to do that. I'm looking forward to working with you in any way, and we'll talk about that, you know, offline. But more importantly, knowing how busy you are, knowing that you're, you know, championing a network that's going to not just something for women to watch, but for all human beings to be able to gravitate and knowing the challenges that it takes to do that. I salute you. So you ain't got no problem having our back, all right? Because we're gonna be right there with you. So Carol Stiff, I want to thank you for joining the Black Executive Perspective podcast. I want you to stay right there because you're going to help us with our call to action. So stay right there.
Okay.
So now I think it's time for
Tony's Tidbit.
Corporate America may give you a title, but it will never define your worth. True success is surviving the system, learning the game, and thriving on your own terms. And you heard a lot of that from Carol Stiff. So again, I want to remind everyone to make sure you check out every Thursday on the Black Executive Perspective podcast, Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. Dr. Burton dives into the timely and crucial topics that shape our community that you don't have time to figure out. So definitely you want to check her out every Thursday, Need to Know by Dr. Nasinga Burton. And then you also want to check out our roundtable, Pull Up, Speak Up, right? Which is coming out next week, where bold, unfiltered voices tackle today's most provocative issues, sharp perspectives. You heard Carol say real talk and a call to action. Don't forget to watch and join the revolution. So as typically people who watch or listen to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, they know our call to action. Our goal here is to eliminate all forms of discrimination. And the way we do that, we have an acronym called LESS, LESS. And Carol Stiff is going to help us with that. Carol, kick us off.
For L, learn. Always ask questions. Always, be willing to say, yeah, I can do that, try it. But then also, it's okay to fail because you're learning.
Absolutely. And after you learn, E stands for empathy. Now you've learned about people that you don't know. You've learned about things that you wasn't aware of. Now you can be more empathetic because you can put yourself in their shoes.
So S, the first S, is to share your insights to enlighten others. And that works really, really well, that you have to talk through things. And I always surrounded myself with a team. And my team was all different ages, different colors, different backgrounds. And I always took their insights and then made my decision.
That is awesome. And then the final S is stop. You want to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. So if Aunt Jenny or Uncle Joe say something at the Sunday dinner table that's inappropriate, you say, Auntie Jenny, Uncle Joe, we don't believe that, and you stop it right there. So if everyone can incorporate LESS, LESS, we'll build a more fair, more understanding world. And guess what? We all will be able to see the change that we want to see because less will become more. Don't forget to check out all episodes on the Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can follow us on our socials of LinkedIn, X, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at a Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, Carol Stiff, president of the Women's Sport Network. We appreciate her being here. I'm Tony Tidbit. We talked about it. We learned about it. We even laughed about it. We love you. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.